So we have a lovely panel who all agreed to come down or be here for this today. And a lot of the questions that we have are questions during the registration process by some of the students and young professionals. So these questions are going to be a little bit more targeted towards that audience. But we'll run this. And at the end, we'll open it up for any other questions from the audience. So please feel free, if anything comes to mind, you're totally welcome to ask. Ian will be stepping out a little bit early, but we're really grateful to have him here. So I'll just go ahead, I'll do a short introduction, and then I'll ask you guys to give a little bit more of an introduction about yourselves. So first we have Myles Gallagher here, who's a museum administrator for the Tohono Nation Cultural Museum. And then Mary Presiunas, sorry, who's faculty at Pima and the director of the Center for Archaeological Field Training. Then we have Danny Montoya, who is, first of all, a board member at large for AAHS, and he's a GIS analyst for MCA Consulting, who is also here today. And then we have Margaret Hangen, who's the large projects archaeologist for the Tonto National Forest. And then finally, down at the end, we have Ian Milligan, who's the Cultural Resources Division Manager for Pima County. So I'll just start by asking you guys to do a little bit more of an introduction, talk a little bit more about your experiences, your current role, how you got to where you are today.
I'm a sucker.
Yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Myles Gallagher and I work for the Tohono Nation, museum administrator at Himdag, which means culture house in the indigenous language. I'm not on them myself throughout the presentation today. I may say we a few times, referring to me and the staff of the museum. So I started academically. I got undergraduate in archaeology from the University of Arizona and a master's degree in museum studies from Arizona State University. I've worked, despite having an archaeology degree, I got into the museum side of things really early on, and I kind of just took off running with that. I worked at a few different museums in the Phoenix Valley, and then after school I worked for a history museum in Colorado for a couple of years. That was fun, but it was too cold, and time to come back, and really excited for the opportunity that I have now to work for the Tohono Nation, the Cultural Center Museum there. I've been there about 3 years. I think that's the journey to this point. So.
Hi everybody, I'm Mary Presiunas. I am anthropology, archaeology faculty at Pima Community College and the director of the Center for Archaeological Field Training at Pima College. I got my BA in anthropology from the U of A, and before that I went to Pima College myself. I took as many classes at Pima as I could before transferring to the U of A, like many of our students do, to avoid the tuition at the U of A for as long as I could. And then I started doing CRM archaeology as an undergraduate and continued doing CRM archaeology after I graduated. I worked for mostly private companies, also the Park Service, and then I went to the University of Wyoming for my MA and PhD. And while I was there, got the opportunity to work for the State Historic Preservation Office, worked for the Bureau of Land Management, and then when I finished, I moved back to Arizona to take a job with Westland Resources, also here today. And I worked at Westland as an archaeologist, as a project manager, principal investigator for 7 years until I moved over to Pima in 2015. So I've been at Pima full-time since 2015. And I made that transition because I really wanted to devote more of my energy towards education and towards helping students. So that's where I am today. And I teach classes in our field certificate program along with Helen O'Brien, who's right there, and other members of our Archaeology Center staff. Danny Montoya used to be one of them until recently. And now we have John Boyd and Aaron Keltz in there as well. So I'll leave it at
Hello everybody, my name is Danny Montoya. I started studying archaeology at Pima Community College in 2015, when I started as well. So I went through the program there. I got as many as the field certificates as I could. I was just really interested in it. I was very surprised at how great the program was. And so from there, I transferred over to the U of A where I got my bachelor's. I started working with local CRM companies here in Tucson, and I had some projects in Phoenix. So I've kind of been able to do some excavation and some survey. I was doing that while I was doing school. Eventually, I did get hired at Pima Community College as a staff member, lab specialist, where I was able to help teach students the field schools just alongside Mary, which was a lot of fun. And while I was doing that, I was also working at MCA doing GIS work. Currently, I'm doing full-time GIS work. I just recently left FEMA, which was really difficult because I love working with students. But so that's what I've been doing, and yeah, I'm really enjoying my GIS work, working on maps for archaeological reports, doing class 1 research, and sometimes being able to go out to the field to help record sites and do some surveys. So I'm really happy where I'm at right now, and thank you for having me here.
Good afternoon. Before I start, I want to say a thank you to Emily and Danny. I want to recognize you too, because you guys put this together, and I think you did a fabulous job. So can we get a round of applause? Margaret and I'm with the U.S. Forest Service. I'm actually out of California originally, which is odd. Yeah, California landing in Arizona. But I it's funny, helping with the food. I was a cook and a waitress for a lot of years before I went to a community college, and like Pima, got into a field class and fell in love with archaeology in the late 1980s and transferred into Pitzer College in Claremont, California. Some of you may be familiar with Claremont colleges. No, I didn't pay that, it was cheap for me. But anyway, and literally I got my degree, and the next day was heading to Northern Nevada to work in CRM. I worked in CRM for about 10 years. And then the economy tanked in the mid-90s. So I thought, well, there's no money, let's go to graduate school. So I got into CSU Bakersfield because it was cheap, and I ended up getting a student career experience program with BLM. Worked in the northern part of the Mojave Desert with Ridgecrest, and then moved down to El Centro. So I was with the BLM for 5 years while I was finishing up my master's degree, and at one point in El Centro was actually running the program by myself. Don't do that. Anyway, finished my degree in 2003, ended up with the Forest Service on the Cleveland National Forest in San Diego. Yes, there's National Forest in San Diego. So that's how I ended up in Arizona. So I was the forest archaeologist in the Kaibab for 15 years, for those familiar with that forest. And then just because I wanted to beat myself up, I ended up helping the Tonto National Forest with a little project called Resolution Copper, which is what, that's not all I do these days, but that's why I'm known as the large project archaeologist, because I handle all the ugly things. But somebody's got to do it. So I guess that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Margaret's awesome. Hello, Margaret. Ian Milliken. I am the Cultural Research Division Manager for Pima County. I started with my undergraduate degree at Vanderbilt University in history, actually, and my mother's from an island in Italy called Sardinia, Italy, and I grew up with my grandfather in fields cursing all of this ancient pottery that sits out in this field and was causing him a nuisance, and I thought it was so cool, and I really, ever since I was a little kid, I was really interested in the connections between people and places and the history of a place, and I always asked, kind of what came before, and they were like, what do you mean what came before? And I said, well, time's a long time, so what was before this, and what was before this, and what was before this? And I said, I had no idea that you could actually become an archaeologist, and so I was living in Italy at the time after college, and I got an opportunity to go and work for Berkeley University UC Berkeley in Israel. And I really kind of, my career took off from there, where I stayed in Israel and Jordan. I worked for Brown University for 2 years at Petra, and that was kind of my inauguration into field archaeology. And then I got an interesting offer to do contract archaeology, and I was like, what is contract archaeology? In the United States. And so I got a job offer to come and do a big survey, and I didn't even know what a survey was, in southeastern Nevada, which was the Gold Butte survey that led to President Obama's designation of that national monument. And so I worked for Far Western for about 6 months doing that, and then I got a job offer again in contract archaeology, moving me down to Tucson, working for Williams Self Associates, which is another contract firm down here. And I loved the experience, but I didn't really like what I was doing. It was a whole different type of archaeology. It was really, I saw it as interesting for its research, but it just didn't fit me. I value it today and what I do, but it didn't fit me and what I wanted to do, but I didn't know kind of what else was out there. And then a unique opportunity started with the University of Arizona, the School of Anthropology, starting an applied master's program. And I applied for that, and I was one of the first 2 students that was admitted to that program. And my grad school time was fascinating because I was going into it really as a guinea pig with a lot of PhD students who were very research driven into their different disciplines. But it was foreign to me because I lost the connection with why we do what we do, and it's the people. There's a value to the archaeological research, but it's really the people's heritage, and that's what interested me. And so we all balance each other out, by the way. It's just I happen to really care about how we relate to our heritage in a communal way, and also how we kind of own heritage or steward heritage. And as part of that master's program, I got a great opportunity to intern with Pima County, who, if you don't know, Pima County is probably one of the most progressive and outstanding cultural resource and historic preservation programs for local government in the country. I mean, it really is outstanding, and I can talk a little bit more about that as we kind of go through this. So I've worked for Pima County for about 11 years now. I started out as a program manager for them, managing different projects, and recently, as of about 3 years ago, was promoted to lead the division, which we oversee pretty much anything that occurs within Pima County in terms of ground disturbance, but we're more than that in terms of our regulatory role. We also are land managers, and Pima County has a robust conservation land system, and it's very rare that a local government owns as much land as the county. And so as a result of our bond programs and an appreciation of the value of kind of, no offense to Phoenix, but keeping our Tucson Basin a little bit more natural in its element, we've acquired about 250,000 acres of land in which we have grazing leases and fee lands, and the incredible stories that go with those lands. And so a big part of our job is to help people and the public engage with that and understand the values of that, and sometimes they're positive and sometimes they're negative, and we've got to negotiate both of them. So happy to be here, and thank you.
So the first question that I have, and this is perhaps a bit of a softball, but it was certainly the most submitted one by people who registered for this event, is outside of academia, how can students and young professionals work towards the requirements needed to work either as an archaeologist or as a cultural heritage professional, more broadly speaking? A lot of these questions were targeted at permitting requirements, field schools, coursework that you need to be taking, or different skill sets that would be useful to develop. So if you guys if anyone wants to start with that one.
This is sort of perfect for Pima Community College. This is what we do. The Archaeological Field Training Program at Pima College was developed in 1976, so it's been around for almost 50 years. And its purpose has always been to fill a gap in training that was left by other colleges and universities who didn't train their students with the hands-on field skills that they need to get a job. So if you're thinking you're lacking in particular field skills, then Pima is a great place to go. That's what we help you develop: technical field skills, anything ranging from how do you identify an artifact, what are the artifact types that you're likely to encounter locally. We're very locally based. So identifying artifacts, how do you perform an archaeological survey, what are the skills you need to do that, how do you conduct excavations, how do you read a map, how do you use a GPS unit, other kinds of survey equipment, fly drones, any of that kind of stuff. So we offer all these technical skills. We also focus on providing practical skills to our students that industry wants as well. So do you understand that you need to be on time for work? Do you know that you need to show up prepared with your water bottles filled in your backpack? Do you know that you need to actually drink water while you're working in the field? All those kinds of practical things. We help you develop your CV so that by the time you're finished with our program, you truly have a solid set of skills, and you're ready to embark on whatever career trajectory you want to go down. We also have really close ties to local industry, which allows us to introduce our students to projects that are being offered by our community partners. We have our community partnership program where we work with various businesses and industry and agencies to help give our students this real world experience and this opportunity to forge these relationships that can lead to jobs down the line. So we are really hyper focused on student success and helping our students get a job, basically. And the other wonderful thing about Pima is it's affordability, right? So we are an economically affordable alternative to a traditional field school. And field schools can be major barriers for students today, not only from coughing up the money necessary to attend the field school, but the time that you need to devote to it, to leave your job, leave your family, for 6 to 8 weeks at a time to go to some other location and be gone that entire time is a real barrier for some people to deal with. And so we are an alternative to that because all of our coursework is embedded during the semester. So it's all locally accomplished. I probably have more to say, but maybe I'll leave it there for now.
Do you want me to touch on the permitting? So, as I think part of that was, what do you need to do to actually be able to earn a permit to work for an agency? Okay, so since I'm one of the few agencies here that does permitting, maybe I'll touch on that. In this state, there's two things. It depends on who the landowner, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe on state and private land that Arizona State Museum is the authority that does permitting.
State, county, municipal.
It's
Not
state-
private.
Private, okay. So, and I'm a Fed, and so on federal lands, it's usually a federal agency that has that, and we have our own permitting system. So with the Forest Service, and I suspect with Park Service and BLM, I know BLM for a fact, they have, each unit has their own permit, or actually I think BLM has a main permit, and then each unit issues you a work use for a particular project. Forest Service, we actually issue permits for individuals. Now, what's the requirement? Is the requirement for a permit with the Forest Service the same as ASM? No, it's not. And I can tell you that the requirements are gonna be different depending on who you're dealing with. And for instance, and it also, you'll find that unfortunately, it'll be dependent on which forest you're on. So forest archaeologists are gonna be a little more stringent about it than other forest archaeologists. So honestly, there's no easy answer here, but I can tell you that probably the best thing you can do is they're gonna be looking for some real qualified things. Most likely they're gonna look to see if you have at least a master's degree, at least a master's degree, especially on federal land. at least a couple of years of experience, and definitely experience being a crew leader, crew chief, at the minimum. It's probably going to be more than that, but I can tell you that's something to be aiming for. I think with ASM, they really want to see higher degrees such as PhDs, etc. So it really boils down to, if you have an interest in getting a permit to work on that land, you need to contact them directly and talk to them and find out what it is they're requiring. But I can tell you it's not going to be the same across the board.
So I'm just going to say one thing about field schools. It's been an interesting shift in field schools. When I was first moved to Arizona, there was an abundant number of opportunities to participate in archaeological excavation field schools. But if you think about it, I mean, as expected, field schools are great for teaching, but they are a destructive action, right? And so when we think of what field schools are actually doing, there's this kind of weighted benefit to saying, is it okay to sacrifice whether it's an ancestral Native American or a historical archaeology, whatever it may be, to sacrifice that resources, information potential for the education of students. And that is a really difficult conversation to have, especially when you're dealing with descendant Native Americans. And so today, the field school horizon looks way different. Many of the traditional field schools that occurred in Arizona, longtime field schools, are no longer occurring. Whether it's not because folks are retiring or anything, it's because the practice of it is now part of the dialogue. It's really been brought to light. And so I find it as a challenge to keep these kind of stringent requirements in terms of archaeological excavation, in terms of field schools, if there are not enough opportunities to do it in the traditional sense. But that doesn't mean that there are alternative ways to doing field schools to get folks the experience. So there's a lot of contract archaeology going on, and one of the ideas that's being floated around on a national and even statewide basis is to encourage for-profit firms to hire on folks that are, students at Pima Community College, or folks that are trying to gain an interest in it, to give them an opportunity, but you're working them in an archaeological context that is already protected under a regulatory framework. Does that make sense? It's not that you're choosing it specifically for the education, you're using education as a product of the mitigation. So that's kind of an interesting conversation that's going on today.
Yeah, in the federal government, Office of Personnel Management, OPM, requires that an archaeologist, if they're going to hire you, they have education positive requirements, and you have to have something on your transcript that says field school. You can come over here and get it cheap. Doesn't matter. The point is in fact, it's getting to the point where it's getting so stringent that even I, as a person who's been in the agency for 20 years, I didn't have a field school because I came in as a student. And they're looking at my transcripts funny because I don't have something on there that says field school. And so field schools, at least for federal agencies, are becoming really, really critical. And it's really unfortunate because we've got a lot of people who are applying for jobs who've got a lot of experience. And back in the day when I started this, and back in the old days, back in the 80s, people came to work with organizations such as yours and got great experience, and that made you qualified to go out and actually get a job. At least for federal agencies, that field school piece, it doesn't matter how much you pay, doesn't matter whatever, if you don't have it on some sort of transcript, they're rejecting you no matter how much actual field experience you have. So and I do recommend going after federal jobs because we have things like benefits and all that stuff, but that's something you should know right up front. You need to have something, and go over and do it cheap with Pima College, and also NAU's got one up there at Apex. Get that on your transcript and you are golden.
Yeah, I think Mary covered basically what I was going to say, is that Pima is an amazing resource here in Tucson.
www.
It definitely helped me get through the door, having those field certificates, having that connection with the CRM community. Having those certificates will definitely get your foot in the door for CRM companies here in Tucson, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want to keep pursuing that education. That's something that we tell our students is like, this is just your first stepping stone. Great, go out and do a survey. That's awesome, get that experience, but don't remember that you do need to keep going. You need to, because there are barriers to entry, like you mentioned, and being able to have those degrees will really open up even more doors. So yeah, I just kind of want to echo that sentiment.
Yeah.
I don't have too much to add to what everyone here has said. You know, kind of outside of the world of permitting and official requirements, I would just add to, you know, be open to experiences that might be, you might initially feel might be unconventional, something like that. One of the first museums I worked in was a mining museum, which, you know, not something I'm necessarily very interested in, but I learned a lot about modern mining, that whole process, and you know, regardless of anyone's, you know, thoughts on it, just the reality of that industry and, you know, how it relates. Another funny little story that I'll throw in is that when I was getting my undergraduate degree, I was working in museums already at that point, and I was able to switch out the field school portion with an exhibit project at the Arizona State Museum. And when I did it, my advisor, who was a very big archaeologist advocate, was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to, you know, because you won't have it on your you won't have it on the transcript." So yeah, thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you all. So I want to talk a little bit more about cultural resource management or resource management, because generally archaeology falls under that umbrella of resources management or resource management. So I'm wondering, how does your institution, organization, tribe, agency consider cultural resources as just one type of resources alongside natural resources? And then how does archaeology benefit from a more holistic understanding of the environment or the landscape?
So at Himdag on the Tohono Nation, the museum is actually a program in the nation's government, and it's under the nation's natural resources department. And every once in a while, one of the nation's politicians or, you know, someone from off the nation will ask us, you know, why is the museum in the natural resources department? Why isn't it under education? Because we do a lot. We cast a pretty wide umbrella. But one of the things that, you know, I explain quite often is that the museum really grew out of the nation's archaeology and cultural resource management. So even though today we do things like contemporary art, contemporary cultural practices, traditional cultural practices, one of the focal points of the museum was as a storehouse for the nation's cultural heritage, a place where nation members can go and experience their culture, learn about their culture, practice their culture. And so I think that that's something that really needs to not be lost, is that, I mean, and a few of the panelists have already touched on this, but you know, when doing archaeology in relation to you know, native sites, sometimes you know, there can be this idea of this culture, you know, was a pre-existing culture or something like that. But it has real meaning to people who are alive today, and in many ways it's crucial to, you know, their understanding of themselves, their understanding of their culture, their understanding of the way of viewing, you know, their entire worldview. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of sums up, you know, kind of the cultural and natural resources aspect of that, at least as far as, you know, Himdag is concerned.
So much to say. I'll give you a quick rundown on a little history lesson in Pima County. So for those of you who've lived here for an extended period of time, probably familiar with something called the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, which was a major initiative that was started in the late 90s, early 2000s. But there was a transition period in about 1998 that Pima County moved from a reactive approach to natural and cultural resources management to a proactive approach. And there were two incidents, one in the cultural element, one in the natural element, that occurred that caused such kind of cataclysmic issues with county and development and everything. And one was with the pygmy owl. On the natural side of it, there was pygmy owls that were sacrificed to a road project that really stopped everything under the Endangered Species Act. And then there was a cultural site with a road project run by the city of Tucson on the southwest side that did not account for the significant Native American ancestral site that was located within that roadway. And the desecration of those two elements really caused a pause for the city of Tucson and Pima County. Now, on Pima County's behalf, what we did is we started to really understand that natural and cultural are part of the same landscape, and that to stop thinking about the biological values and the cultural values, because once you actually dig into it, you realize that there's a synchronous relationship between those two that has existed from time immemorial. And so the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan is less a single document, but rather a firm investigation into every element of the environment and the cultural aspect that you can imagine. So it's looking at riparian areas and wildlife connectivity and Native American ancestral sites, pre-colonial, post-colonial contact sites, historic railroads, people, different ethnicities. And so once we kind of were able to kind of lens that, it really shifted into understanding that, okay, what are we actually trying to do in a planning standpoint for economic development? Can we find places that have very low cultural value in the sense that there aren't many physical remains on that site? Now, we're not talking about cultural landscapes, we're talking about physical elements on the land surface that aren't a endangered species habitat, and really focus development to those areas, whereas we conserve areas that have more significance on any one of those elements. And so a whole land use planning really started in the early 2000s that continues today. And this conservation land system is what led to the acquisition of the mountain parks that we all enjoy. Tucson Mountain Park, Colossal Cave Mountain Park, Tortolita Mountain Park. It also allowed for the acquisition of other recreational resources like Canoa Ranch, Fort Lowell, being managed and preserved as it is today. Los Morteros, which is a archaeological cultural research park in Marana, and Honeybee Village, another one up in Oro Valley, Steampunk Ranch. I could go on. And so it's understanding that those are important to preserve. Now that's step one. Now step two is, how do we convey that meaning back to the people who agree that it's important to save these places? Because if you can't participate in your heritage and you can't understand it, then what are we doing it for, right? It's great that we have contract archaeologists that are going out prior to and handling these resources with care, attaining that information that we need to know of our understanding and broadening that historical research. But when it ends up in a report or a museum, does the meaning end there? And I say no. I say the meaning ends is that when we can show and appreciate what value it gives to us, and that's a really loaded term because it could be a lot of different values to a lot of different people. With regards to, I would say that the connection between people and place, I would say that Myles touched on it, and is that places absent of material culture aren't necessarily not important with their heritage value. And we find a lot with the tribal descendants that we work with, that the place itself has meaning, and it even transcends a greater importance than the actual physical manifestations of their ancestral remains, because it is the location of the activity that resonates with them. They feel that spiritual connection, and when it's robbed of the ability to share in that connection, that's when the trauma happens. That's when you cause harm. And it occurs with the natural resources as well. I mean, we keep thinking that when we do these cultural surveys, and many more firms, to credit them, are doing cultural and natural surveys together, because there are natural elements on the surface that are cultural resources. And we're not just talking medicinal plants, we're talking the way that plants are in harmony with the landscape is a significant. We're talking monuments and peaks that have no material culture that we would be able to recognize, but they share an origin story, they share a story of traditional cultural belief. This is all connected, and fortunately the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, when I talked about progressive approaches at the local government level, this is what the acknowledgement was, and this is the practice today in how we manage county development within unincorporated Pima County, as well as the conservation lands.
Yes, being the other land manager around here, I'll weigh in. I think you pushed it really well. There's a lot of struggle, especially on agencies like mine, where our bread and butter is basically National Historic Preservation Act. That's basically that's what I apply. It's got limitations. It's got a lot of limitations. It's got a lot of limitations because it is pretty much it was designed, and it certainly was revolutionary at the time, but the limitations are that it's designed and focused in on material culture and material things, and less on the landscape, and certainly less on biological aspects. And so as land managers, we're trying to figure out how to morph that and make it relevant, and try to be able to take into consideration those other aspects of culture that aren't just archaeological remains. Especially when looking at things like cultural landscapes, traditional historic places, looking at those larger landscapes where you've got visuals and other aspects. So it's not easy. It's not easy. We know that there's a need to look at these, and we're trying to figure out how to do that in the regulatory situation. We certainly, thanks to this current administration, not to get political here, but thanks to them, they're really pushing agencies like mine to really look at tribal communities as partners and take in their own. They've got great knowledge about how to manage this landscape, and we need to be being able to take that information in and apply it to what we're doing. And you're seeing more and more of the forests are doing that. They've all recently gone through their management plan process, and forests like the Kaibab that I was on specifically went to tribes, and they incorporated in their management plan recommendations from the tribes as part of the long-term management. So more and more they're beginning to do that, but it's slow coming, and it is a new way of doing business. Also with the Forest Service, we actually have a separate, what we call tribal relations program, which not only handles, it's not just focused on archaeological resources, it's actually broader. So our approach is not only about the physical resources, landscape, but also political, culture, civil rights. We put a lot of smoke into people's communities, which can be very dangerous. We also butt against a lot of reservations where we have a lot of shared resource issues. So the conversation is much, much broader, and that's helpful to us in terms of enriching our ability to manage these resources. But the truth of the matter is we're still learning, and it's a difficult road, but we're definitely moving towards being broader in our approach and looking more at a much more holistic process. But the truth of the matter is that we're still going to be limited by these laws that are very limited in scope. So it's going to take us some time to be able to get to a point where we can be required to do that and not do it because we feel that it's necessary, if that makes sense.
I think, so coming from a background of working in CRM firms, a lot of the times, like, the focus is on the material culture. That's what we're out there collecting data, trying to find sites, artifacts, stuff like that. And I feel like there is kind of a shift that is happening currently. A lot of my colleagues just came back from, attended the Historic Preservation Conference just last year, and there was a lot of talks of, about the cultural landscapes. And so That's kind of a new idea. That's kind of some people are incorporating that. It is kind of slow moving because not any one person can give a definition for what they consider to be a cultural landscape, but we know that it's important. So that is definitely something that moving forward in archaeology is going to benefit anybody involved, is being able to pay attention to not just the material culture, but all of the things that might be important to descendant communities that traditionally archaeologists kind of neglect. So that's kind of what I'm seeing is that shift in paradigm and being able to start focusing on some of those things and kind of having that consultation and being able to bring in descendant communities when doing CRM work.
The first thing I thought about when I read that question was the language that we use to describe these things, right? Natural versus cultural to begin with. We are taught from the very beginning that there's this distinction between natural and cultural, and you're out on a survey and a crew member picks up an artifact and says, is this an artifact? And the crew chief says, no, it's natural. It's natural. So this terminology it sets us up for this artificial distinction between humanity and the rest of the natural world, right? And so it's something to kind of be aware of and think about, and it's nice to see that we are moving away from that and towards this more comprehensive and holistic understandings. And then the other problematic piece of language is resource itself. I don't know if you've ever looked that up in the dictionary, resource. But if you do, every definition is about something that you can exploit for some sort of economic profitability, something that benefits you, namely economically, really. So that's its origin. And that's the word that we use to describe cultural resources, so it's just something to think about. And it's not what most people mean when they say cultural resource anymore, but how is it shaping our view and the views of people like lawmakers who don't quite understand that distinction, right? So I wondered in thinking about this, what different tribal perspectives on that would be as well. So I was going to ask Carl.
Great. Well, I posed that question thinking about all of those same issues, and I'm glad that you all touched on that a little bit, is I think there are some things that we can shift with our language and ways that we can move forward. So thank you for all of that. One thing that you guys pretty much all touched on is talking about working with tribes and descendant communities in our work. And more lately, we're hearing about collaboration and not just consultation. That's kind of been, the buzzword of the past few years is collaboration. So I'm wondering, first of all, what makes for meaningful consultation and collaboration in your work? But then second, how can early career professionals, people who might not be in the room for consultation itself, how can they engage in that work and how can they prepare themselves for working with tribes if that's not necessarily the experience that they're being trained in?
Probably one of the first ways, one is make yourself available to go out and spend time with tribal communities, get to know tribal communities, and not only just reading the histories and ethno-histories, but actually go meet people and individuals. They're here, they're a part of this landscape. It's not just the past, it's our present. Also, if you're interested in going more towards the regulatory, there's quite a few laws and regulations, and I was just looking up, the Forest Service has an app, a Tribal Relations app, and it's believe it or not. The reason why I recommend that is we just put out a new plan for our Tribal Relations program, but also it's really excellent, and it's excellent to take a look at it and get to know all the regulations that are out there. Now, not all the policies and regulations do we deal with on a regular basis, because much of what drives us, at least from an archaeological standpoint, is compliance with the in HPA. And NAGPRA, which by the way, NAGPRA there's new regulations that just hit. So if you're not familiar with it, please take the time to get to know that, if know them if this is something you are interested in. But I think that, yeah, two things: get to know the communities, get to understand the community, the people in the community you are living and planning to work in. And if you are interested in going into regulation, doing something land managing, get to know the regulations for sure. And then and by at least you don't need to know it verbatim, but at least familiarize yourself with it and understand when they apply and when they do not apply. And honestly, then it really comes down to developing those relationships. When you're doing consultation, it's really about the relationship building. Absolutely. So as you're getting started, that's one of the things that I would recommend, is just familiarize yourself.
So I'm gonna start out. I think cultural resource is like so polluted in my mind right now. So I'm gonna call it heritage, right? Because that's the word I like. If you look at heritage management throughout the world, Australia and US are kind of these oddballs, right? Because of our colonization history. And when I fortunately had the privilege of starting out working in archaeology in a country that has laws of national patrimony. It has over 90% of the population directly connected to the history of the stories that are on that landscape. And so it was so odd to me coming over here and realizing that the bulk of archaeology that I was exposed to was the heritage resources of a minority community that doesn't have a real prominent voice in the management of that landscape. And it's echoed throughout my career, and why I think I became, I'm not going to speak for all archaeologists, but for myself, I became very, I had a large sensitivity to what I was doing, because the decisions as a land manager that I was doing had effects on a heritage resource that wasn't my own, that I respect, and I firmly came to understand the history and appreciate the history and advocate for that history and to stewardship, whatever else you want to throw on there, but it wasn't my own. I had to be a voice for someone else. But what I learned is that I couldn't always be that voice for them. I needed them to be there with me in order to be that voice to the communities that I was serving. And so it's interesting, collaboration and consultation. For me, the difference is that consultation is required under the law, but collaboration requires one thing. It requires trust. And consultation does not require trust. Consultation is an action that you can go through, and you can be on opposite sides of the table, and you can never come to an agreement, and you have completed consultation under the law. You just have to document it. Collaboration means that you are building a trusting relationship. You are actually having meaningful dialogue where it could be a give and take. It could be that you're still not in agreement at the end, but you leave it with a trusting relationship that you have listened, you have spoken, and the other party has listened and has had a chance to speak. And it's difficult as a starting out student to engage in that level, because trust takes a lot of time. But what I would say is there are resources out there of agencies that engage in that's where you can be exposed to it through an internship or through invitation through classes and so forth like that. But really, I mean, the best way of doing it is to build those relationships, find opportunities in communities. Now, there's a whole realm of heritage resources that are not Native American, okay? And often there is not a voice or a set of voices that's easily discernible to advocate for those resources. Those are more, at least in our professional experience, more the nonprofits or organizations that unite against some kind of advocacy. Like there's the Fort Lowell Neighborhood Association, and there are others that really dedicate themselves to kind of the history of a single place. But outside of kind of post-contact resource management, there really isn't like a single or multiple stakeholders that are coming to these consultation meetings. So usually you're with land jurisdictions and other managers and potentially nonprofits like Archaeology Southwest or neighborhood associations and so forth. But I'd encourage anyone to reach out to AAHS, because I know while everyone's hiring in the private sector, we always are looking to educate and provide opportunity to the next generation of heritage management professionals. So.
Yeah, I think you both did a great job there of summing it up. I think I'd like to throw in another, just my own thoughts on both the words as well. I think, consultation is, we can all sit around the table and have our voices heard, but what is going to come of that? If there's still one person making the decision, there's, they can still do whatever they want. And I think with collaboration, you're opening the door for, if you're the one calling the shots, it requires giving up a little bit of power, if it's true collaboration. And an example from the museum world is, for a long time, you have your traditional type of, monumental museum, and you go in and the curators put together an exhibit, and the curator might as well be God, because everything the exhibit says is, factual, and you'll take that and go home with it. And that view, of course, is mistaken, and of course is being challenged and being rethought today. A lot of museums are shifting to community curation, where community members are brought in, and the community members are actually, they work with curators to curate different exhibits. And this is something at Himdag that we're really focused on. Our curators are O'odham, and so they're very involved in the culture, in the communities and everything. But regardless, we still need folks from the communities with different perspectives, different life experiences, putting exhibits together that will be useful resources for the community for when they visit the museum. And that is something that I think that in the museum field, at least, just in terms of curation, people are excited for, but sometimes there can be that hesitancy in true collaboration to give up that little bit of power, where it's like, you want to do what with the exhibit, or that sort of thing. And I think going forward, everyone's going to have to really get used to the idea, whether it's in land management or wherever, on that true idea of collaboration there. So those are my thoughts.
I think we have a good example of a productive collaboration at Pima with our recent partnership with the Pasquayaqui tribe, where we have an agreement for our students to be able to go and survey on tribal lands. It's mutually beneficial. We provide the results of our surveys to the tribes. The tribe gets to better understand the archaeology that's out there. It involves opportunities for our students to learn about Pasquayaqui tribe culture and history, and it provides opportunities for us to engage with tribal community members who might be interested in archaeology and career opportunities in archaeology. So we're excited about that partnership, and our students, not only did they get to meet the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer and learn what a TIPO even is, right? They also got to work directly with him as a part of our survey class last year, and we're going to do it again this semester as well. So we're excited about that project, and
So for me, I guess, I'd like to acknowledge that yes, the collaboration element is very, very vital. And we're seeing more and more in the CRM firms making the attempt to include that. We see places like Westland with their tribal monitor program. It's a great program that helps people who want to get into the field and do the field work from tribes to do it. But for me, just going through as a field tech, what I noticed is like a lot of firms are hiring tribal people who are doing field tech things, monitoring, excavating, surveying, and it's a great opportunity to start building those relationships even at just a field tech level. And some of the relations that I've had with crew members have been excellent. Just being able to have that different perspective, being open to learning from them because they have unique things that they can provide that you wouldn't generally know about just going through education in school. So they bring a lot to the table, being open to having those relationships with them and giving weight to what they say and paying attention. All those things are things that you can start doing as somebody who's just getting into archaeology to start kind of building that rapport.
That's great. Those were some awesome responses, guys. Thank you. So the next question I have kind of goes back to some of the questions that people submitted, and there was a series of when should I go to grad school? Is grad school necessary? Should I publish, or should I get more fieldwork experience? What is the best way to make connections? Should I go to conferences, things like that? So just generally speaking, how can graduates and young professionals, recent graduates and young professionals, gain meaningful experience that can help advance them in their careers? And this is outside of education. What are the opportunities that people have? What should people be looking into? What types of Archaeological winter parties should they be attending? Things like that.
Yeah, shameless plug here. Yeah, join AAHS. We offer all that stuff, events like these. These are perfect places to network. And really, networking for me was one of the biggest things that kind of propelled my career forward. Being able to attend conferences, workshops. The archaeology community here in Tucson is a very tight-knit but very deep community. Putting your best self out there and really building up your reputation and keeping that in mind, it goes a long way. People love to talk, so when you apply for jobs, they're gonna ask about you, and people will tell them the truth. So just being your best self, getting out there, being on time, that's really a good way to just get yourself out there.
I couldn't have put it better. I think that's absolutely right. I was going to say one of the best things you do is attend something like this. Seriously, I mean, because how many people in this audience are with CRM companies? How many are with agencies? You're here, you get a chance to talk to them, they get to know who you are, your name is, they get your face. These two have got a credit they can put on their resumes. Getting involved with organizations like this, you put it on your resume. So the more your resume builds, one thing I hear from a lot of students especially is oh, I'm new, I'm a student, I don't have much to put on my resume. And in the Forest Service, we're looking for resumes and not CVs, first of all, so we're not expecting you to have a publishing credit. It's nice to have, but not expected. A lot of people are like, well, I've only done one field school, I've only been out. To be honest with you, that's fine. What we really want to know is, will you show up on time? Can people get along with you? Can you work in a team situation? Are you communicative? Can you write well? Have you held a job? Have you held a job? I'm sorry, but the best job I ever held was my waitressing job. Seriously,
It was money.
It was money. You learn to work with people from different fields. You're a good communicator. You get really good at managing your time and stuff and all that stuff. To me, that was probably the best experience I had before I got into an archaeology. I use that all the time. So don't feel if you're coming in new that you have to have this loads and loads of experience, or you have to come from the best colleges. Didn't I mention I went to CSU Bakersfield because it was cheap? Look where I am now. So the point is that, get in, and part of that is because I had spent 10 years in the field, I had a network already. I knew how to dig a hole. I knew how to walk with it, but I needed that piece of paper. So really, don't feel intimidated like you have to come from the best schools. It's nice to have that, but really what it boils down to is, are you a good worker? Can people get along? Are you willing to get out? And are you dedicated and interested and want to be involved? That's what people are gonna gravitate to, not that you got your degree out of Harvard. So, please, aware. But the point is don't feel intimidated, just get involved, and there's plenty of opportunities like this to get involved and get to know people. And that's gonna take you a long way. I'm sure folks in this room, how long y'all know each other? A lot of years, right? A big network of folks that work together, know each other, and have supported each other for years. As you're coming in, you'll get that network too.
So I'm gonna start to answer this question with a weird plug for Fran here, because Fran, what was your career?
I'm an educator.
You're an educator. I would say Fran is probably one of the best archaeologists I know today. And why is that? Because of the dedication and care that she gives every day to the Site Stewards program. And that's a huge plug for the Site Stewards program if you really want some practical expertise that gets you out there to understand and get exposed to things. But Fran has probably seen more archaeology than a lot of young archaeologists that I know, and even some older archaeologists that I know that are working behind a computer every day. So Fran and Carl are kind of premier site stewards for the state of Arizona, in my opinion. I mean, they really showcase what the meaning of that program is and the dedication that they give to it. And it's not about, like if you went into a business degree and you were trying to move up in corporate finance or something like that, my wife works in corporate finance, yeah, where you went to college, that weighs a huge amount. It's not necessarily what your grades were, it's where you went to college, networking, everything. Fortunately, in our career, people care that you have the whatever base degree for the job that you're going for, but they really don't care where it's from. It'd be great in the Southwest. If you were educated in the Southwest, it kind of gives you an inkling that you may have some relevant experience in education that you can apply here, but it's not a limiter in any way. Now, unfortunately, in the Fed system and in the state of Arizona, there is a glass ceiling. And it's under those permitting requirements, and it's under that in order to get to a certain level, you're gonna have to get that degree. Now, it doesn't mean that that's what your career wants, right? If your career ambitions are to be that dirt archaeologist that loves to travel around and get exposed to all of those things, you don't need that, right? But if you find, like I did, that I wanted to try academia, I wanted to try private sector CRM, and it led me to where I wanted to go, right? And I had to follow the requirements for that ambition. I had no interest in going to grad school, none whatsoever. But I reached a point in my career where I said what I wanted to do required me to go to grad school. And I'll be quite honest, while I valued my time in grad school, I wish I would have had those 2 years back to be doing the job that I'm doing now, but in order to do the job that I did now, I had to do the grad school. And it's really odd that that's the way it works. And I will tell you, 2 years working at Pima County, I learned 10 times what I learned in my grad school for what I do today. I learned some really valuable things that don't really apply. It's like, I told my 11th grade teacher, my calculus teacher, I walked in the first day of class and I said, I will never use calculus in my life. And she looked at me, she's like, how do you know? I was like, I'm telling you right now. So 20 years later, I went back to my reunion and she was still teaching. I tapped her on the shoulder, I was like, still haven't used calculus.
You're one of those people.
I wanted to add one additional right? That'll make a huge difference. Somebody who's in the field that you're trying to get into, somebody who's in the job that you're seeking to do. I've had a lot of really great mentors. Mary, Ellen O'Brien, everybody at Pima Community College has been an invaluable mentor to me. Chris Lane as well. So just getting yourself into positions where you can learn from somebody who's already there will be very valuable as well.
And I would just say again, for making connections and getting experience, Pima, right? Come on over. Just one more bit I'll add to that. We have our community partnership program. We work closely with all of the local companies in town. We also have a formal business and industry advisory committee where we work with many of these same people to ensure that our students are getting industry standard training in terms of the skills and the technologies and the methodologies that they're using. And it's really important, as well as forging those connections. And oftentimes, there's internship opportunities with these people, there's job openings, there's project-based, multiple things that you can do, which can lead students toward a job down the road as well. So.
Awesome, that is some great advice. So I only have one more question, and then I'll open it up to the audience. I do have a whole extra list of questions if no one here has any. But the last one that I sent you guys in advance was, what changes have you seen younger generations bring to the workforce, and what are you excited for in the future of archaeology, or museums in your case?
I'll go ahead and go first. I think, probably every generation says something like this, but the younger generation coming in is so passionate, and they have such a grasp on some fundamentals that you really need to know that are just, below the level of the profession. Just, like anti-colonialist ideals, anti-racist ideals. Just, those very fundamental understandings of, this important work that we do, because, like we've been saying, that heritage, this work is so closely tied to heritage. You can't be coming into it with, these previous ideals. And while you may not be able to shake every single aspect of it, just understanding that, these are issues that, like, as a nation, a county, a state, a tribe, anything like that, everyone's grappling with. So I think that's something that is really cool that I see in a lot of young people, and I really like that, and I think it's easy to feed off that energy and that passion. So.
Yeah, I definitely see that too. Topics that maybe not that long ago would be more of a debate are now just sort of commonplace attitudes, like the importance of repatriation and collaboration, tribal involvement, all those kinds of things are just, everybody knows that now, right? And in terms of what I'm seeing with students, we have excellent students. They are highly motivated, kind of like you said, but I really do, highly motivated. They're passionate about archaeology. They want jobs. They want to move forward in their careers. They're, excited to do that. They're also, I think, not as willing to put up with low wages and a lack of benefits as perhaps people have been in the past with this profession. And so something that excites me about the future is just the tremendous amount of work that there is right now, where our students are, not going to have to struggle to find a job in archaeology for a good long while, right? Maybe Jeff will talk about that later. So, and going along with that, maybe that demand for archaeologists in this labor market now, I'm hopeful that, wages and benefits will rise accordingly. That will make this career path more viable for a lot of people who are shut out of it at times because they can't, the low wages, they can't make that work. So.
That's a really good point. I mean, the first thing that you're told when you're starting to study archaeology is like, I hope you don't want to make money. And I think that's definitely something that I've been seeing with younger generations, is that they are valuing themselves a lot more, and they're not afraid to put it out there that, they value their work. And yeah, I mean, kind of the same sentiment that I do see, like a lot of the students that I've worked with are very driven. They're excited to get out into the field, and then that just kind of rubs off on you. So it's really good to see that there's a passion, that there's an interest. Like we've been getting at Pima, they've had a lot of students these last couple of years after COVID. There's been a real resurgence of people who are interested in archaeology, who want to go out and be able to be out in the field. So that's really good to see that. For me, it's kind of interesting because I actually am now working with a couple of students that I help teach at Pima at MCA. So it's really nice to see them transition from those field classes to like the real world, and being able to apply all that and seeing how well everybody did teaching them and then being able to apply it. So it's kind of a really, really cool thing to see. I'm really excited to see where archaeology is going to go. One of the biggest things is that these new archaeologists, myself included, we don't know how the state of archaeology, how it was before NACRA. So yeah, a lot of these things where it's just now automatic that of course tribes should be involved, of course like things need to be repatriated, right? How are they not? So that's definitely something that is pushing archaeology in a better direction.
From my perspective, what I'm seeing is, and I just got back from the Society for Historic Archaeology in Oakland, and for the first time met with the Society of Black Archaeologists. What I'm hoping to see, and I'm beginning to see, is cultural diversity come into this field. I just found this out, actually. I'm one of 5 Black archaeologists in the Forest Service, 2 of which I know just came in. So, and the Forest Service, and Ian touched on this, we manage more than tribal sites, not to disparage our descendant communities. We manage a lot of resources that are associated with other cultures, and frankly, they're getting short shrift. And because the law is really focused in on stuff that's associated with descendant communities, not disparaging that, but there's a lot of stories and history that is not getting told because there aren't people out there advocating it. We have a tremendous Black presence in the lumber industry historically up in northern Arizona where I live in Williams, and that story's not being told because there aren't people there to advocate for it. So Forest Service manages significant African American associated sites, especially back east. And those stories are not getting told. And then the descendant communities who were there, who are related to those places, they're not asked to be a voice at the table. So I think if we can diversify this field, then you see more people who come in with different stories, different backgrounds, and I'm also talking economic backgrounds. I'm talking, sexual diversity, I'm talking it all. Those, hopefully they're bringing that culture with them and bringing those interests and being able to help diversify those stories. Because there's a lot of resources out there on public lands that have no advocacy, and there's stories that are just, we're gonna lose them if there aren't people out there willing to get interested in them and want to get involved. So that's what I'm seeing, what I'm looking for and beginning to see is this new voices coming in and advocating for these places.
Yeah, as a young person coming in right now, I feel for you because you're in a weird time where there is this, and Jeff is probably going to touch on this, but there is this really odd shift going on where these large, very notable research institutions that like U of A and ASU and NAU, they're finally dealing with that really difficult question of having to acknowledge that research isn't everything in terms of archaeology, and cultural resource management is taking a different shape. It's got touchy-feely that they're like, whoa, what is this? It's not all data-driven research, right? But unfortunately, the programs are suffering and the pipeline is suffering, right? There isn't a great cohort with a lot of interest, and it's not because they're not out there, it's because the institutions are not prepping them at the undergraduate level to move into that, because the graduate programs and PIMA's great because PIMA's got this niche now. It's got this niche to say, we are committed to, they're the progressive ones in making a way more proactive shift into saying, we acknowledge the science-based approach with everything else that we're hearing from our communities today, right? But these old indoctrined, institutions, they don't have the correct faculty to know how to teach it, nor are they willing to support it and fund it. And that's the big kicker, right? So it's really gonna be on you guys to find those programs that still exist and to force, these institutions to say, hey, we want this. We want, and you will have us as students, and this is where we want to go. Because I'll tell you, the pool, we all say that the private firms are hiring. Everyone is hiring, not because there's that much work. Yes, there is that much work. It's because there's this generation that is retiring, and there's not a lot of people in the pipeline to fill these spots and to groom and educate into. And it's really shocking to me. And it's a major concern. And Jeff wrote a great article that I'm gonna have you pitch about really what's going on at a national level in this very issue. So.
All right, well, that was the last question that I had, so thank you all for answering that. I'll open it up now. The cord only extends so far, so I'm going to ask you to come up, just state your name, maybe your affiliation, and then your question for the panel.
Hey, thank you very much, guys. I want to say thanks to all you guys that did the panel. Very informative, especially the Pima folks. I didn't realize how amazing of a resource Pima is until today. My name's Dylan, by the way. I wrote it in Greek lettering, kind of style. But, I'm a senior, archaeology guy, classics minor. I'm kind of trying to figure out what the next step is. I know graduate school is obviously expected, but I understand that it takes a while to get to that point too. So I was thinking, do you recommend perhaps going to Pima to get field school experience? And I am a family guy, so spending time away from the family is obviously going to be a big issue if I, don't do something that's local. So what do you recommend?
You know what I'm gonna recommend. We have flyers, as I said. And there's also a number of students here sitting behind Jordan. Yeah, you can talk to. Yeah, how many are Pima students here?
We're Pima graduates.
Stand. Yeah.
Everybody.
Woo, stand. So there's quite a few here. So I will say that, we do have quite a few students right now with their BAs. We have a range of students. So sometimes students come, they're working on their AA to transfer over to the U of A. Sometimes they're just working on the field certificate. Sometimes they have their BA, but they don't have any field experience, so they're seeking that particularly, and we're great for that. Yeah, so we can talk more about it if you'd like afterwards. Yeah, and just in terms of our student success, I wanted to point out a study that was done by our advisory committee found that, and this was in 2021, Chance Copperstone put this together for us, who's now with Chronicle Heritage, used to be with Tierra, and he found that 20% of the permanent workforce in CRM in Southern Arizona were graduates of the Pima program. 20% permanent employees, and for more temporary employees, the number was much higher. At Tierra Right of Way, for example, they made up more than 40% of the workforce, Pima students or alumni. So we have really good success rates for students getting jobs.
Yeah, I mean, graduate school's great. There's no question about it. But it doesn't mean you have to have it to get a job. Especially the Forest Service. Part of the reason why graduate school comes into with the Forest Service is if you want to get into like the program management level. But at the bottom, at the entry level, at the district level, actually a BA would go perfectly fine, and with the field school. So you are absolutely employable in an agency. And if you have a family, and I have to say, with a family, it is tough. I mean, I did the shovel bump thing for 10 years. So I know how hard that is. Working for an agencies like Forest Service, Park Service, there is a little more security, and there absolutely is things like, health insurance and all that. Also, and honestly, if you as a senior, if you're a student interested in getting to an agency, you should be starting to think about getting at these student internships as when you are sophomores. And here's the thing, is some of these programs that are available for students, many of them are pathways into permanent positions with the agency. But you have to complete a certain amount of hours of work under those programs to be eligible for competitive or non-competitive conversion as permanent. When I was in the Student Career Experience Program at BLM, I was a graduate student and I had full benefits. And I'm about to retire. So the point is that, you know, there are oftentimes some of these students, and you're expected to work and you're expected to go to school. So that there are the support schools. So there's what they call pathways programs, which they're open right now. If you're interested in federal position, Forest Service, we're hiring like crazy right now. But there's also something they call resource assistance positions, and this is through third-party agencies or organizations such as CORE and like Greening Youth. They hire students, and they also, if you complete a certain amount of hours, you also again through those hiring authorities can be considered for permanent positions. So school. There are actually quite a bit of opportunities for students, and you should be looking at your sophomore year, because hopefully by the time you're a senior, you've got those many hours, and therefore you can start thinking about looking at permanent positions. And they're really only available when you're students. So that's unfortunately why I always recommend you start looking as a sophomore. But there are also hiring authorities such as Recent Grad, which basically is available for 2 years after you finish your degree. So get into USA Jobs and get familiar with what's available. But there is quite a bit.
Do we have other questions?
This question is directed directly at you, Danny. I should probably start with that. Yeah, I'm Garrett. I'm a junior at the U of A right now, and I'm minoring in GIS, which is why it's directed towards you. And what I've noticed is a lot of my GIS classes, these are very directed classes. They kind of tell you exactly what to do. So my question to you is, someone doing GIS stuff for archaeology, what can I expect to be asked of me?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think like the single biggest responsibility that I have is managing data. So all of the data that the field crew collects, that all comes back, and I have to be the person that's, all right, let's take a look at it. Is the FN list looking good? Like everything that goes into like the nitty gritty of like being able to produce a nice IO table or sites, being able to calculate acreages, things like that. All of that kind of falls on your shoulders, and the program at U of A is excellent. I was fully prepared coming out of it to be able to go into my GIS position at MCA. I was really confident with that, and I don't think there'll be things that we'll have to kind of figure out how to do at times, but with all the fundamental skills that you learn at U of A through that GIS program, you'll be set.
Yeah. So I'm in advanced GIS right now with Dr. Weissler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There's some really good classes there. Yeah. Definitely.
I know this is directed to you, but let me add, one of the things that GIS people do, and you'll choose polite to say this, is help people like me who know just enough to be dangerous.
There's so much jargon in GIS.
There is a lot.
Ridiculous amount.
Well, welcome to our profession where it's like the land of acronyms. And jargon. So interestingly enough, in my private sector job, and then in grad school I took a couple of GIS classes, and I took those skills, and in my current job I realized that GIS is just such an invaluable tool, and you're in a great position right now because GIS is not just it's going to benefit our profession so much, and those benefits have yet to be realized and how much they can, in terms of modeling and so forth. But long story short, the one thing they will not teach you in GIS, especially in heritage resource management is data is not just data. Data transcends that and has a different meaning when we're talking about archaeological sites, and especially boundaries. Because the idea of boundaries, for a lot of disciplines for GIS, it's very easy. These are the polygons, this is the ownership layer, blah, blah, blah. But it's not so cut and dry when we're talking about heritage resources, right? And oftentimes the product that, the data that you're managing is the data that is the single centerpiece of what most of us do in the consultation and collaboration world. And it's understanding how to incorporate that and show it in a way that, you know, if you were to use a solid line for your boundary of a parcel, right? But for a traditional cultural property, you may use a boundary that emphasizes that this is a tentative boundary that, you know, and it's that kind of symbology. So it's these intricacies that you're gonna get through the practice of listening to people about, it is gonna change the way you manage your data and handle your data. And then there's the whole sensitivity lens to it, right? So a lot of, at least in our group, we have requirements, and I'm sure Margaret does too, where it's really locked down. And you have to understand that you are the gatekeeper of that, and that if it gets manipulated in such a way or exploited in such a way that causes harm, that's a responsibility that, you know, is embedded in these agencies to say that you guys are the gatekeepers. But at the same time, note that the information sharing aspect of it. So we try to do as much as we can to provide information out, at the same time securing the information that needs to be secured. So.
Thank you for that. Other questions? Yes, please.
Come up here. I have a question about what you think the future would be for, should we say, old school archaeologists who made a career like I did, studying ground stone, and people who type pottery, and palynologists, you know, what we would consider, we were considering doing state-of-the-art research when we were coming up. Is there a future for that type of research?
Oh, hell yes. This business long enough, yeah, he said don't age yourself. I have no problem with my age. I do think that it is, because, you know, we've gotten so much in technology. I understand we kind of feel like, well, you know, where am I, is what I learned lost? And I would say absolutely not, because especially for you younger folks, you need to know where this is coming from. I mean, data, I don't care how much data you manage, bad data is bad data. And, you know, I always laugh that I manage a lot of kidney shapes and dots on maps, you know, because really we do a lot of planning based on maps with kidney shapes and dots on it, and boxes and all that stuff, and you still need to relate that to physical things. So it doesn't matter how many kidney shaped boxes you have on a map, if you cannot relate it to a physical thing, much less look at that physical thing and interpret it rightly or wrongly, you gotta figure out somehow to make sense of it. I think we still have to have that, and I think it's critical for young people to know and understand that. And I'm sorry, I love GPSs, but if you don't understand how to use a compass, you're in trouble. Yeah, I mean, seriously. You know, it's just because it's ceramics or especially brownstone. I think that's very understudied personally. You know, I love ceramics, but give me some groundstone. But I absolutely think you all have some incredible knowledge that you need to be giving off to younger folks. And especially, I agree with Fern and those of you who got into this business a little bit later and have kind of made it a second or retirement business of your own. Let me tell you, I worked with some of you all, and you all are great. You have a lot to offer because you have been out there learning a lot, and you can offer that to these younger folks coming up, that your observations and your exposure. And so I really do think you have a great place in the future of archaeology.
If any of you specialists are willing to hold workshops, please come and talk to us, and we can connect you with some students.
So I would, I think that I mentioned a balance, right? So just because I choose to, I'm hoping that there are future specialists that want to learn that and come through the pipeline too, because that's their passion, right? My hope though is that more attention from future generations can look at existing collections, because they're lost, and there is so much sitting on the shelves and so much potential to know what we know now and revisit it, but not a lot of people want to dedicate the time to it because it's not glitzy, but it is a definite need, right? Why we did all of this in the past is to really understand and we have an unbelievable resource sitting on shelves that nationally that just everyone ignores, and it's getting dust, and we're all about the new, but I hope that there's a part of our younger generation that's interested in the old. So.
Yeah, Ian basically said it there, but if you're into ceramic analysis, come visit Himdag and check out the storeroom that's there. It's such and such cubic feet of boxes and boxes and boxes of ceramics, and it would be awesome to have more studies coming out of there. There's new ceramic analysis techniques where they can determine which areas of a geographic region that the clay that made the ceramic came from, and that information would be invaluable to the Tohono Nation to understand, this is where the clay came from exactly that made this piece of material, that made this ceramic, that sort of cultural heritage would just be huge, and we need some ceramic analysis to get that done. So.
Yeah, and I will also add a personal example. My master's thesis is, I'm working with a tribe who said, hey, we have these collections on our shelf. We don't want to touch them. We don't want to mess with artifacts, but we need it managed. So they basically said, take these boxes, do something with it, say something interesting about this site, and then we're going to put it in a museum and call it a day. So there are people that need this service out there, and you need to know the basic skills in order to do that. So, yeah.
Can I make a plug?
Sure. Yes.
Hey, I'm Rebecca Harkness. So the University of Arizona has actually been working on creating this type of program. The Bureau of Applied Research and Anthropology, and we work with the Arizona State Museum So we are in our 3rd year of doing that right now, and we've done 2 projects so far. The Indian Ruin, and then also the Silver Research Project, and then we're probably going to be moving back down into the area. So if you have anybody who might be interested, that is another way to go work with old collections. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I know we got people waking up from naps.
Yeah. Well, have any final thoughts or anything said today that you want to pass to the audience?
Go to Pima.
You guys didn't mention that you actually train, you have classes in artifact analysis.
Yeah.
They have classes in artifact analysis as well as, field techniques and all that. So we think it's important too. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what we've learned is that there are a lot of resources and getting connected to them. And I think we have a good group of people that are, entering the field and getting ready to do that. So we'll end there.